You're listening to Coast Business Radio with Mike Ryan.
Gigi Foster is one of Australia's leading economics communicators and a professor at the University of New South Wales School of Economics. She was named 2019 Young Economist of the Year by the Economic Society of Australia. A professor in the School of Economics at the University of New South Wales, she was awarded a National Citation for outstanding contributions to student learning in 2017. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the US, Professor Gigi Foster received her BA from Yale, majoring in ethics, politics and economics, and her PhD in economics from the University of Maryland. Gigi, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and navigating the world-class internet that we don't have.
That's right, exactly.
There's another discussion.
From my kitchen here.
How to spend $80 billion and still have third world, actually not even that, fourth world communication at our fingertips. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, now, despite expert opinion, was an economic shutdown necessary at all?
Well, when we say expert opinion, I guess I'd ask who are we talking about as experts? Obviously, there is a health issue on our front headlines every single day now, and that means that the health modelers, the epidemiologists, should be on board with modeling what the likely projection of infections and deaths and whatnot is here in Australia and around the world. But I will argue that when it comes to government policy setting, which has many effects, not just health effects from the COVID-19 virus, but other types of health effects and welfare effects, then other kinds of modelers, particularly economic modelers, should also be in the room. And my feeling is that perhaps that didn't happen back in, several weeks back when the government was thinking about whether to lock down and what measures to take, and that because we really neglected the longer run, even short run, economic consequences, which translate into human welfare, we've ended up in a situation where only one side of the story has really been played out in policy, and that's going to cost us.
Was that a panic reaction by governments because they had stretched the health system and no means of extensive testing and tracing?
Look, I think it was a panicked reaction. I do think that there's an argument to be made for trying to stem the flow of a virus in the most vulnerable populations, certainly, and that also allows time for the health system to gear up and get ready for potentially more cases. But I do think that even within health now, we are seeing some of the crowding out of other kinds of treatments, other injuries and illnesses that are simply not getting seen to as quickly or at all right at this moment, and that's going to be costing lives. And it's because those treatments have been crowded out by all the expenditure and focus on this COVID-19 threat. And that is an indicator of panic. We have somehow abandoned our ideas about what human welfare is really about in the broad sense.
What about the economic impact of the shutdown? Pretty well accepted, but is there credible modelling for Australia?
Well, look, it's a very uncertain time. It's very uncertain because we've never been in this type of recession before. We've never been in a situation where we have literally stabbed our own economy in the stomach in order to, prevent something from getting worse in a different part of the body. And so now when we open up, it's unclear really how things are going to behave. There are obviously sectors that have been booming because of what we've done. The hand sanitizer sector, the bog roll sector, some other kinds of industries that have supported the essential services and goods that the economy needs, food, for example. But there are other sectors which have taken a body blow. And I do expect we're going to find effects on those sectors for a long while now to come. But really, modeling is really in its infancy. I haven't seen attention put towards it as nearly as much as I've seen attention towards the epidemiological models. And that's a problem in my view as an economist.
Where do you see us being in 12 months' time?
Well, as I've said elsewhere, recoveries don't come in V-shapes. You don't sort of bounce back immediately. And the reason for that is because the link between suppliers and customers all the way up the supply chain to the raw materials, and including the links between employers and employees that are severed when you have this kind of extreme shutdown, don't just bring, life and have life breathed back into them when everything is over, when the lockdown ends. People have to re-find jobs. Companies have to re-find suppliers. those links take a long time to rebuild. And so we should not be under any illusion that this is going to go away within a couple months. It will be with us still in terms of the GDP, in terms of jobs not being, worked enough by people. There's going to be still unemployment higher than it should be, higher than it otherwise would have been. And the industrial mix of Australia will still, be reeling from the effects that we're seeing of things we're doing right now. And so that is definitely a longer run problem. And I wouldn't even say it's confined to the next 12 months, because don't forget the effects that we're seeing right now on children who have been told to essentially stay home and study online.
Good luck with the online bit.
Look, it's not the optimal way. There's a reason why we have schools, and it's not just that schools are more effective in general than your average parent at actually educating a child in what they need to know to be a productive and functioning member of society when they get older, but also that schools help to counteract some of the regressivity that's in our society initially. So if you have parents who are very disadvantaged, economically, socially, educationally, etc., it's their children who are suffering the most right now. And those kids are home in not as functional families, potentially, in environments which aren't as rich in resources. They don't have the opportunity to go to school, and school is a great leveler of those sorts of disadvantages. And so we're depriving those children even more than they were already deprived, and they're going to be carrying that for the rest of their lives.
What about housing? Do you see a major turn down in housing?
Well, I do think that's likely, partly because some of the overseas investors who have, propped up some of our housing prices in the recent past will probably be less keen on coming to Australia if they have to be in quarantine for 14 days before they can go see properties. So I think that will happen. And I think, as part of any recession, you generally do see a dip in the prices of houses and a lot of other prices as well. Yes, I would definitely expect there will be an impact there. Does that mean that I'm going to immediately go out and buy a house? I'm still a confirmed renter. I actually prefer renting. I like the flexibility.
I was reading last night, in fact, they were saying that it could be the value of property could drop by at the most 30%. Not a good way to be, is it?
No, I think a lot of people are, particularly those who have mortgages, are going to be looking at those figures and breaking out into a cold sweat. I think that's a major problem, and that's just going to add, obviously, to the financial distress that these people are already under because of the issues in the labor market that we've spoken about.
With this massive deficit that looms, how do you think the government will deal with the fallout?
Oh, look, I'm not really of the modern monetary theory camp that says that, we can keep spending until the cows come home. But there is a moderate version of modern monetary theory, which I think has basically the same message as traditional monetary economics, which is that we need to calibrate the money supply to make it such that we have just the right amount of money to do the activity that we want to do in the real economy. So if we start spending more than the economy can really soak up with its activities, then we have a problem. And at the moment, I do think that JobKeeper program and other fiscal stimulus that the government have been doing are the right thing to do, conditional on already having stabbed the economy in the stomach, which they did. So once you've done that, you need to look after people. So I do support the stimulus packages, but at the same time, we can't just be writing checks forever. We have to get the economy moving again. If economic activity slows to such a snail's pace that there's just not enough activity to merit continually writing those checks, then that's where you get problems economically, and then I would worry about excessive deficits. Yeah.
How do you see us managing the lifting of restrictions and the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, I do think there are some obvious first steps to take. I think sending the children back to school is a no-brainer. We should absolutely do that as soon as possible. Certainly in my state of New South Wales, we're right in the middle of school holidays now. The kids could be brought back to school for the next term. I think that would be optimal for everybody concerned. And I do think that then you start to think about what Sweden has done, which is not to have a lockdown, but to essentially say, look, we know this is dangerous. We don't want you to catch it necessarily, but on the other hand, we also don't want to prevent you from going out to a restaurant, to a cafe. So I think those sorts of internal tourism type, hospitality industry companies would be the ones to open up next. And I think domestic travel should open up. Now then, I think the main blocker is going to be people saying, well, we can't open the international borders because we're just going to get people coming in and infecting us again, right? in a second wave potentially, and maybe a worse one because, of course, Australia is heading into wintertime now, and this virus may, it seems like, warm weather less than it likes cold weather. So I think that's going to be the biggest blocker. But if we're doing it, yes, I would open up the schools immediately, then the hospitality sector, and then everybody else, basically.
A comment on how other economies have dealt with the virus, including the US of A with Donald Trump, who I like.
Yeah.
There are some of us out there. We do like
yes,
him.
definitely.
Yeah.
I like what he's been saying about this lockdown, essentially, right? Which is that we have massive economic effects of it, and we need to get the economy moving back up as soon as possible. I very much agree with that. I think that he and other world leaders who may initially have wanted to stay away from lockdown found it impossible to toe that line in the face of public opinion after a certain point. And there was, as you probably know, a big model that came out of Imperial College London in the UK, which I think significantly influenced that economy's position, the government's position there. And now the UK is, locked down even more stringently than many other places, including Australia. So I think this has been a case of sense being trumped by panic. And yeah, I do agree with Trump. We should get the economy back moving as soon as possible. It doesn't mean I agree with him about everything, but on that point, yep.
I don't think many people do agree with everything, but at least he uses social media to its fullest. Sometimes not to the greatest, but to the fullest. Yeah, I think go Donald. Anyway, but I can't say that. I better cut the one out later, or leave it in and leave it in and live dangerous. I don't know yet. Now, finally,
I know how that feels.
Yes, it's pretty scary. Is Australia very vulnerable, even if we have been seen to have achieved a rapid flattening in the curve and the infection rates?
I mean, we are no more vulnerable, I think, than many other developed countries. If anything, we're probably slightly less vulnerable because we have, at the moment, a warm climate, and even in the wintertime, it's reasonably warm, and a reasonably healthy population relative to some developed countries, a reasonably active, sporty sort of culture, not as much kissing of the grandparents and the grandchildren, which I think helped to spread the virus in Italy. And, we have sunshine. So, we're doing pretty well anyway from the start. But I do worry a bit about the fact that we're heading into wintertime, and again, the virus may be more virulent in a second wave. Now, ultimately, you don't eradicate a virus that has spread this far in the globe. It's not actually on the cards. So I think one of the things that hasn't happened from the very start is the sketching of an end game for the policies that we've seen. And I still haven't seen that. What is the end game other than herd immunity? And I know people don't like to talk about that. It sounds like a scary thing. Oh my gosh, we're really relying on so many people being infected. But there is an argument to say, what is the alternative? Are we just going to sit on our hands until a vaccine comes, which it may never happen? It may never come because this is a coronavirus, which is like the common cold. We don't have a vaccine for that. So, I think the most we can hope for is that in the shorter run, in 6 months or so, we will have several treatments which will lessen the case fatality rate. And those treatments will be made widely available. And so people who do catch this thing and go down hard have a good chance of surviving it anyway. And then the governments can spin the line that, hey, we've achieved victory or essential victory over this virus, reduced it to the severity of, a bad flu, and we can move on with our lives. And that would be great for humanity in general.
I have to say, you're actually sounding more positive than I am. And I sit at home at night looking at the bottle of whiskey and then realizing I can't afford to buy it. So I just look at the empty bottle. But I see the world as being ruined at this stage. And the longer this goes on economically, which becomes everything for us, I can't see a way out for many, many years until for example, you go to a bar. You can't get too close. So you got to have that 4 meter rule, which they have. So therefore, the bar can't make any money anyway. This is exactly. You're absolutely right. At the moment, with the mentality we have about this illness, that's the problem. People aren't going to return to their normal ways. No.
That's why it's so important to find a different message. the governments of the world need to find a different message. And the message, I think, has to be something along the lines that we've achieved victory, moving on. That's got to be the message, because that's the sort of message that has worked in the past, even when true victory hasn't really been achieved. I mean, think of wars, right, which haven't fully ended, but somebody in power has claimed, oh yes, we've, achieved what we wanted, and then everybody forgets about it and they get on with their lives. And that's basically what we want in this case. So the question is how to provide the governments around the world with enough ammunition to be able to make that claim credibly in the face of the existing fear that we still have. And that's why I'm hopeful about treatments. I think, for example, proning, which is simply turning people onto their stomachs when they're getting low in oxygenation of their blood, apparently this is a treatment that can prevent, or at least people getting onto ventilators, that can be, touted as, hey, look, we found something that, works to reduce symptoms. It works to reduce the fatality rate. Once we can get some studies of that, some robust evidence, then we can make a claim, and the governments can play that. So that's for me the most hopeful scenario.
All very, I think a better word than interesting, but that's all I can think of without swearing. So all very interesting, the future for us. I mean, but finally, it sort of reminds me of, the skit of the plane, the plane in trouble, and it's about to crash, and the pilot says, look, we have all the safety measures worked out. What we want you to do is grab your ankles and put your head between your legs and kiss your butt. And maybe a few Hail Marys may not go astray. I really hope it's not like that.
Look, I hope so too, and I do think that the analogy to belief in superstition or supernatural or something to save us outside of ourselves. That is a very natural human desire. And I think in this case, it's just good to have a bit of a sobering reality check. We are the ones who are responsible for dealing with this crisis in the most humane way possible. And that's why I'm speaking out, because I think that calling has been missed by most of the governments of the world.
Gigi Foster, Professor Gigi Foster, thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure.